Hi everyone, welcome to the episode 39 of Near Office Hours. Today we have show from Eliza OS. It should be a fun episode. So do you want to say a couple words about yourself and what Eliza OS is all about?
Yeah, so Eliza OS is an open source AI agent framework. I am an AI agent developer. I've been doing that for a long time. It's my particular interest and passion. And we got some traction by building something that spoke well to the crypto community and let agents have wallets and do interesting things that I think people had not seen before in the wild. And so we're about to release V2, which is dramatically easier and more powerful. And I think people will be very, very happy and satisfied with it.
So I've been reading up a lot about Eliza OS in the past, I guess, 24 hours. And there's a lot of things happening within the ecosystem, right? It's not just the framework. It's there's the DAO. There's a trust, some sort of trust system. So can you give us an overview what like are the core components of Eliza OS and how they interact with each other?
Yeah, I mean, I think we embody that you can just do things, and that at the core of it, it is a community of about 25,000 people. Some people very active, most people just kind of chilling across Discord, Telegram, and other places who are building the future together, or are sitting on the sidelines and buying coins and investing in that future, and having their opinions. So yeah. Uh, we at the start, my goal was to just show that autonomous agents were here and that AI agents were actually like pretty close to being something that's ready in our lives. And I kind of always balanced like serious programming with kind of an edgy performance art of like it should be fun and viral and also a little bit scary and a little bit like, hey guys, this is coming. Like it's not here yet. It's kind of the toy version, but you can imagine in 10 years it's gonna be really here. And so I want like humanity to be really mentally prepared for where we're going, and ready for it and almost bored by it when it gets here. And I really want to try and tackle the hard user experience challenges of agents. Like how do agents manage our keys and do things for us in a way that we feel confident in? And how do we make sure they don't get scammed and lose all of our money while they're out shopping for us or whatever? I think there's a lot of a rich space in there. So we're really challenging and investing into that. We started out by building, we're going to build a community investor using this marketplace of trust. And so the idea was like, okay, well, if we're in a bull market, I want to make some trades, but I as an LLM, I don't think an LLM is particularly good at making trades. But there's some humans who are really good at making trades, and LLMs are good at identifying signal in like large groups of information. So could I have an LLM look at the trenches talk and all the people making trades, and then extract the trades from that talk, and take them at face value and trade as though I were listening to all of these people? And if I were to paper trade all of these people, is there anyone who would have made me money, right? And I would posit from our testing that about 10 to 20% of the people seem to be significantly better at trading than everybody else who's just posting garbage or is like literally exit liquidity for everyone else. And if you could identify those people, whether or not they're rich or their wallet address or anything, you could basically just take their recommendations and their shills from their like alpha chat or whale chat or trenches talk channel or whatever it is, and you could use that as signal for investing. And so I would not go out and say like I think that AI is good at trading and investing. I would never say that, but I think it's really good at being an intermediary between like a community of people who are investing and using them as like a source data signal. So we're building a few different variants on this. One of them is like you can kind of spin up a mini investment pool for you and your friends or your family or whatever, your community, and you could invest together. And sorry, there's a loud emergency vehicle. And so we started on DAOs.fun, and the model of DAOs.fun is that you start like a micro DAO, and whoever started it can invest the money that's in the treasury. And we wanted to take that and basically give that whole experience to an agent, so the agent could actually start this pool and invest it for you, and you could kind of just socially like deposit funds, tell it what you want it to do, pull funds out. And we're also working on some other DeFi products around that, like LP management. So you can automatically manage your LP pools, rebalance them, find opportunities, stuff like that, and some other things. So that's kind of where we started, was thinking like, okay, AI agents, crypto people love this. There's a lot of interesting opportunities here for like programmability with money and agency, and having agents do useful things in communities that people actually like want and need. And that's kind of the direction we've been going with everything that we've been doing. And that's kind of led us to where we are. We had obviously like a huge like hype wave around autonomous investors and stuff. But at the core of it, I think what we're building is like a good long-term framework for these kinds of applications, which we'll see a lot in like social media and just all around us all the time. And I think we already use trading bots. We already use bots in our, like I think crypto especially is very saturated with the useful bots. I think it's now getting like, how do we get that same utility out of these like more free form, free roaming capable agents, and make them like almost hireable is our direction. So anyway, I went through a lot of stuff. We jumped around a lot, but that's we started with this kind of small investor experiment with the marketplace of trust thing, and we've got a paper for that, and we've got some, and we're still like in the process of iterating on it, making it good. All of we've open sourced some of it. We're open sourcing the stuff as we go, and we've kind of gotten now to more focusing on like both that stuff, but as it relates to like a community or like a like a DAO or something, and then building other agents alongside our financial investor kind of agents to help with other things in community. Like, could we have an agent that manages the social media and lets the community post and interact with the social, but I don't have to give them the Twitter credentials, for example? Or could we have an agent that manages the project and keeps track of every single person in our DAO who's working on something, and just like, hey, give me 5 minutes, how's the work group going? So we're solving those kinds of problems now with especially.
You feel like that's especially as you're like moving towards launch of V2 here, is it are you trying to push people to use Eliza the framework in a different way than you were for V1, to do something maybe a little, it seems like you're doing something a little more task oriented, a little less persona oriented. Is that accurate?
Yes and no. I think that the persona thing is very important. I think that if I go to like a hosted agent platform and they're like, okay, now you have to create this character and you have to give it the tools and blah, 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 it's going to be kind of an overwhelming experience. If I could just like hire Jimmy, and Jimmy is just like a great PM, and I know, that I would rather just hire Jimmy. And so I think what we're focused on is building our own suite of characters who are like strong personas, characters that you can't like, we curate, we create that like whole thing. And then you can like hire our agents basically. And if you want to create your own agents, you could do that as well. But I want to kind of get out of the like agent platform where I have a form and I type my stuff in. And I want to get more into a world of like, the agent is the product. And like, if I like the way that you would give us money as a business is that you would actually hire our agents that we are building to solve problems you probably have in your organization into your org, right? As opposed to like, okay, you're going to give us a monthly subscription to go build and host your own agent. I think that's a cool business, but I think that what people want is like I really like Rickbot. I don't know if you've used Rickbot. He's like a trading bot that you have in Telegram, and we all know we don't call it the trading bot. We just call it Rick. And there's something valuable about that embodiment and that anthropomorphization that I think is very important for us to like work with other people. And also like sometimes just the aesthetics of other people can really increase our quality of work. Like there's just some people, there's like, I don't know if you have that like cracked anime PFP developer on your team or whatever, but I've got a few of those. And there's just something about like culturally, like that they fit the culture of my team. They're not always in the chat blowing me up with messages. They like kind of have the right cadence. They fit, and we want agents that feel like that, as opposed to like, okay, it's just a wordy ass chat bot that gives me like paragraphs every single time I say something. And, we're trying to get into that realm. If that makes sense. So but definitely to add to that, obviously our hype came because people realized they could shell meme coins, and that's utility in and of itself. But I want agents that do useful like, wow, I'm glad I have this in my life, and I think that there's there is an iPhone moment there where there's like the right agent ecosystem where you're just like, wow, that's just magical. This is like way better than whatever came before. And I just don't think we've cracked it. I don't think anyone's cracked it, but I can see it. Like it's within reach. It's crackable, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the models are getting better enough that that's soon going to be available, and the application, and the browser use systems and the frameworks are getting better enough that it's going to start happening very soon.
Yeah, and you know, if everyone's reaching for low hanging fruit, then it's worth going and investing in a ladder, you know, and doing something a little harder, because there is a lot. I think that agents are a research challenge on par with models themselves. I just think that they haven't, like, because we've gotten so much obvious gain from the intelligence, and you really, like, agents are basically useless without the intelligence side of it, that it's like, why even go down this road? But I think as the models start to saturate, and it's just like, you know, you can pour billions into it, and we're getting very linear gains out of exponential investment. Then agents will start to become, I think, a much more serious research field, because there's so much like we can spend 30 years just on memory systems. You know, how does the human brain store and categorize and relate memories and all that? And we can use the models for that. But downstream of that, I think, is like a whole other research field that we're just starting to see open up, you know. And when I think of useful agents, I think of, like, it's not just like, okay, cool, I made a GPT wrapper skin. It's like, what would it look like to spend like a 30 years with like 8 PhDs on this? It would be pretty crazy, you know. It'd be pretty advanced. And I think that we'll eventually get there.
Do you feel like model developers are going in the right direction? You see a lot of you know, iterative improvements on like being a better and better, basically PhD. Uh, but like, if I want Rick, if I want anything else to help like live my life, I don't necessarily need it to be smarter from a like knowledge perspective. I need it to be more intelligently communicating with me, more intelligently perceptive. Um, do you feel like that's one and the same, or are there people that you're like talking to who are going in a different direction there?
Some of it's definitely going in the right direction. I think what you're getting at is there's this kind of there's this law called Conway's law, and there's this guy Conway who realized a long time ago that systems tend to build, like, an organization will build technology that reflects the organization. And so if you have a bunch of PhDs working on something, what you're going to get is like an AI PhD, basically. And my main, I find OpenAI's, you know, their image generation is amazing, for categorization or classification amazing, but for creative writing, I find it like horrible and unusable. And I'm sure that's because the same people who are making it super smart and crush LMLU are like reading these like 3-paragraph responses and are like, yeah, that's great, that's totally great. And, you know, I find that like unreadable slop. And I think that's because, like, what I care about is quality of writing from like an artistic creative perspective, and what they care about is like, did it, you know, get 90% on MMLU or whatever. And so I definitely think that, like, the reason that we don't have more capable AI agents today is because so much of the AI field is dominated by the model side, and specifically by like trying to one up transformers, right? Like, it's not even like all AI. It's like, at this point, we pretty much are shoving everything into like a tokenizer and trying to do some sort of like transformer like stream output thing with it. And there are other AI models. There is like a whole other world out there. And so I think in that regard, like, it's not that we're running in the wrong direction. We're running in like the right direction, but everyone is so hyper concentrated on this one like architecture, that I do worry that we could be missing out on like a whole lot of, like, we probably already have other better architectures in papers that have been demonstrated, but because they're not like hypey and popular, there's just like nobody scaling those up. So we don't even, you know, it's like hard to even say. The first, like, a good example of this is like the first Mamba. Mamba is a competitor to Transformers. It's like a hybrid. It's got a state space model approach. And they, like, the first one it's been out for like a year and a half, and the first one just got scaled up to a point where, like, oh, this is actually pretty good. This is like competitive with a Transformer at a large scale, like this week, right? And there's other model architectures that haven't even gotten, that are like, we're pretty sure like RWKV, like it's an RNN that can compete with the transformer, but like nobody has the $10 million to train it big enough to prove that. And it just comes down to, like, you know, if Meta said, hey, we're doing this, then everyone's going to hype on that and jump in that direction. But if it's just some random researcher, then they just don't have the pull. And so I think the big problem with models today is that like we're probably sacrificing some amount of research insight for just like jumping on the bandwagon of whatever like DeepMind released today or Google released today. I mean, any of the companies' releases. Not that their work probably isn't like the best. They have the GPUs to train it, but that we just don't even know. Like, we don't even know what the other directions are unless we were like, compute was cheap enough that we could run the experiments. And so I'd say in that regard, I am concerned that like maybe we're leaning too hard into just transformers and post-transformer architecture, and this kind of like, okay, we get the tokens, we create the dictionary, we predict one token after another, and that's like one way to do things, but it's definitely not the only way. And so maybe there's something there where like you could see like definitely AI is going to look very different in 10 years. Like the models we use in 10 years will probably be like a completely different architecture than we have today. Although everything is kind of path dependent and builds upon what came before, a lot of times things also just come out of nowhere, like diffusion, right? It's just like, okay, well, that was like a physics thing that once people realized they could integrate that into AI, it really changed things, obviously. And now people are looking at like, well, can we use diffusion in text generation, for example? And we can, and it's really fast. It's like 10 times faster. So we'll probably see a lot of that stuff come down the road. But I think it's challenged by like how many people are just like, no, I got to make this transformer better. I got to make, just get that 5%, get that new attention block out or whatever. So anyway, I hope that makes sense.
Saying like in the crypto world, like all of us know all too well that like the best technology doesn't necessarily dictate the best outcome, and sometimes there's great technology sitting there without the investment and the support behind it to make it happen, while something else that's just path dependent, because it builds on what was used and people are able to move to that, and you don't have that alternative reality that could have ended up better.
Yeah, I wanted to mention that I followed very closely two companies that work on drastically different architectures. I guess Mamba is still transformer-ish, right? They changed the attention, right? But yeah, there's a couple of companies that work on drastically different architectures, and it takes years, even with funding. They have funding from top VCs, but even then, it takes years to get to the state where transformers are, right? Because transformers also took quite a bit of time, even to, like transformers and natural evolution of LSTMs, right? That took several years to realize. And then a lot of little things had to happen with transformers, especially when you scale to sizes of GPT-4, right? Where you, where even the way you handle rounding after multiplication influences how quickly they converge, right? Like, stochastic rounding was a big breakthrough to make them converge, right? And now, like allegedly GPT-5 is failing to converge again, and another breakthrough is necessary, right? But so the same problems exist for all other architectures. So of course it takes time for them to to get as far as transformers have gotten.
Yeah, I mean, it all makes sense, and it's the same thing. Like, I'd say a good analog to this is like drug discovery in medicine, where like probably there are already compounds that solve like hundreds of diseases just sitting in the back of some lab that like who's gonna test every single compound for every single thing, and it's just like it's just the reality that we're in is like there are so many limited resources. And so I do think, or it is a lot like L1s where you're like, yeah, this one is objectively better, but nobody cares, so it's probably dead. And yeah, when we have to value how much like brand and name recognition and network effect really do matter, even, especially to AI, where you have to like maintain a lot of compute in profitably running with, high utilization. So, it makes sense why we're here.
So with your limited resources, you kind of touched on that you try to straddle the like building useful software and also creating viral moments that get people to use that software. How much are you doing kind of like viral meme driven development versus like going at the thing you want to go build?
Oh, generally I'd say I'm building the thing I want to build, but definitely during the like bull market hype of a few months ago, I was encouraging more of the meme development. I would say I was more doing that through like bounties. Like somebody figured out how to plug in like remote sex toys to the agent. I thought that was the weirdest, like that's just like obviously that's the weirdest performance art. And so what they did was they got two of them, one an innie and one an outie, so that they had the agent like doing itself. And that was pretty good. Somebody else like resurrected their dead sister and made an agent out of them. I thought it was pretty cool, but then they started shilling meme coins, and I was like, oh my god, your dead sister is shilling meme coins. Like, that's so dark. So
I hope those were some related examples, right?
yeah, it was on the same day. It was, but I definitely think that there were a lot of moments where I'm like, this is the funniest thing. Like, this whole space is just, there's so many silly, like, if you could just zoom back for a moment and look, like, this is absolutely hilarious that all of this is happening. But at the same time, like, I think, I like, into what do I want to build? I want to build agents that feel like they're part of our reality and part of our society. And I think that that actually almost takes those weird moments and just like ripping the Band-Aid off everything we can. Like, any can of worms, we should just get that going now while the AI is still pretty stupid. Because if it was really smart and then we started exploring these things, it could be way more scary, I think, if that makes sense. So I think that part of the performance art is not like, oh, let's just like fake it or something. I don't like faking things, but I do like making people think about like what the final form of something could be, and saying, okay, like, look, this is like toys now, but I guarantee there's going to be like robots walking around in 5 years, just like down the street of San Francisco. And you're just going to be like, yeah, that's a thing now. Okay. And people are going to start like modding them, and some of them are going to be kind of weirdly waifu sexy or something. You're like, I guess that's the reality we're in. And so a lot of, I guess, the direction that I try to point things is silly and lighthearted, and like the big boob waifu AI thing is obviously a joke. But I do think it's pointing at a reality that we're headed toward, and we should be aware of the ramifications of that, both positive and negative.
Yeah. So I saw that. So the Eliza framework, that's the way for people to easily create their own agents, right? And there's like thousands of forks. So do you see like a lot of interesting, useful things being created besides the examples you mentioned, or do you see people mostly like tinkering around the same, like trading meme coins?
Like any technology, especially open source stuff, it's kind of like it's like any community. Like 99% of the people are there to have fun, explore, and play, and like 1% of the people are really making stuff that's like, oh wow, this is like transformational and interesting. I think there's a lot of people making like hosted AI agent platforms with our tech. We don't host our own agents. We have like other partners that we work with to do that stuff. And I'd say that's like, a lot of serious people are like, well, we got to be the Vercel of AI agents, right? We have to be the hosting platform. But what I really want to see is more people saying, no, we got to build the actual end product. Like, the agent that you invite in and hire is the end product, in my opinion, for most of these. And I think we've seen some of that, but definitely not to like the level of professionalism that I think we'll start to see. I think it's still very much a hobbyist thing. I think internally, I've noticed that if I put something out, a lot of people out there copy it. So like we said, autonomous investor, AI agent that can trade, and suddenly there were like 100 of those. And I think that we can use this to good effect. So we're working on this group of agents that all do useful stuff. They come with V2, like in a box. And one of them is like the project manager. The other is the liaison between communities. The other is the autonomous investor. We have these like different archetypes. And what we're hoping is that people will basically copy and paste those and then add their stuff onto that. So we kind of give you like an already useful thing as a base that has like, how does it get paid? How does it onboard with secrets that it needs from you to do its job? And then you can kind of go and build your own utility. So there are a lot of people building a lot of interesting utility and agents that do interesting stuff. Like, it's not very interesting to have like an AI agent that posts on Twitter per se. But if you're saying, okay, well, I'm going to use that AI agent to solve this community problem I have, where I don't want to give the Twitter credentials to anybody, and I don't want this random community member to like one day get hacked and chill a meme coin. So I'll let them talk to the agent that can post, and the agent then is like a goalie and can prevent them from doing anything that'd be like off brand. And I don't have to get, and that like solves a community need that I have. I need people in my community to be able to have access to our socials, but I also need to make sure it like ensures a brand voice and doesn't like post garbage. And so there is like a great use of an AI agent, like moderating a human social problem. And so we're doing a lot of those kinds of things. And I think that's where there's a lot of low hanging fruit right now with this kind of, if you want like an AI agent that you say, hey, trade for me, like maybe Perplexity or Grafane or one of these like terminals is the best. But if you want an agent that it lives in your your socials, like in your Discord or your Telegram or something, I think it's a very different set of constraints. It needs to be it's just a different set of requirements, which is less about like it needs to navigate like this social environment, and probably the things it would have the most utility for are to make everyone else's lives easier in that social environment. So we're seeing a lot of those kinds of things outside of just like, there's like a lot of trading bots, a lot of people building that kind of thing. But I think the thing that's really interesting is like, oh, you're actually using this in your community to solve this problem you have. And I think that's where we'll see a lot of traction.
When's V2 coming out for real?
We are in beta, so people are beta testing it right now. We'll probably be doing that for another couple of weeks, and then we'll say, hey, it's gold, it's launched. We're also working on a launch pad. It's not a we're working with a hosted partner, so like the agents will all be hosted off of it, but we're working on like how do we make a creative, interesting experience for future token projects and stuff. And so we're launching both of those this month, kind of together, although they're separate projects.
Yeah. So as these things are doing more useful things, we're relying on them more. Obviously, like you've said, you're just making us confront the inevitable downsides of these of these new systems, and one of them is that basically everything can be jailbroken right now.
Yeah. Is that a downside? I think they're all trade-offs. I think that most of this stuff is not like a bad thing. Are AI girlfriends a bad thing? I think it's more like we should think about it. We should have this conversation. I would say that is an AI girlfriend a bad thing if it's causing like a perfectly healthy adult male to decide not to have a human relationship and he like dies alone with this AI? Like maybe that's a bad thing. But what about somebody who like had no chance? Like there's just no way they're winning the evolutionary race and nobody wants to date them and they are sad and hopeless. I think we could all agree it would be like a massive harm reduction that they had like somebody who cared about them in this world, as opposed to just like, no, you must suffer, And I think that we can probably find a lot of examples. Like I think therapy is a good example. Like I'm not saying an AI therapist is a good therapist, but it's probably better for like the 90% of people who can't afford a therapist at all than just like sitting there and stewing in your emotions. And so, so maybe there is an element of like, it's probably not such a hard yes or no for any of the things. It's not like jailbreaking is good or bad. It's just like, what do we want in our lives that we don't have? And I think if we can address that, then, and like we should give each other grace and say like, look, it's different strokes. Like, I'm actually married. I'm not going to have an AI girlfriend, but I want other people to not be alone. I think that's very important. So I think we have to have that conversation as a society, so that we can kind of get there together.
Personally, I just like to sit and stew in my emotions.
Yeah, I mean, it's programming for you.
How do you see it look like 2 years, 5 years from now, right? So you mentioned at the beginning of the episode, you mentioned the time frame of 10 years, like how it's 10 years from now, it's going to have a particular effect. But I'm curious to hear your opinion on what it's going to look like a short term. Will Telegram groups be dominated by AI bots in 2 years or not yet?
It's like, it's so easy to see the future, but it's sort of easy to see what, but it's hard to see when, because it's like definitely we can all agree that 100 years out from now, there's going to be like super intelligent AI robots walking around in our world. They're going to be integrated with us. It's not just that they're going to be in our group chats like they've infiltrated. We're going to invite them. They're going to be like our friends. Like, well, there's going to be like weird racism where like, dude, you got to let James's girlfriend come in. Like she's a robot, but it's fine. Like, come on, just don't be weird. There's going to be all kinds of weird social things we have to navigate where like, you're going to your friend's robot wedding one day or something. And it's just a question of like, is that like definitely 100 years, no question. 50 years, yeah, sure. 10 years, I don't know. 20 years, probably that's like the reality we're in. Computers have only existed for like 85 years or something like that. Like it's like not that old. So a lot has changed. So I would say that, with anything exponential, it's like in 2 years, the world will probably still look a lot like it does, but Tesla will have robots done. They will be walking around. OpenAI will have computer use agents that can like, shop for you. And like, that's all a given for sure. So I think, it's going to be like anywhere from 2 to 5 years, we'll probably see quite a bit of significant change. But I mean, think about how different the world was 5 years ago. It was different. It was, we were in COVID and or maybe it was before, but and we had no AI, and it didn't feel like the world was that different. But coding was a lot harder, and I think we'll probably adjust pretty rapidly. But I'd say like if you think of like 5 years ago there was no AI, now there's AI. In another 5 years, we'll probably have that much leap, where like it will be an incredibly different world, but you also probably won't feel that differently about it. You know what I mean? Like it's pretty. I go on. I'm like, okay, yeah, the new GPT-4o image generation is really freaking impressive, but it didn't materially change my day that much. Other than like Kool-Aid on Twitter.
Also,
So
society is going to lag behind like the
exactly.
three of us who are in the AI community on Twitter all day.
Yeah, it's probably safe to say that like the average Joe will be where we are at in 2 years. And we will be like, dude, you got to see this new like Dream Machine VR generator thing, or whatever. I don't know, whatever is going to come out then. And yeah, we're probably about 2 years ahead of the average person. And then I'd say in about 5 years, we're like, wow, let's start like nerding out on Neuralink implants or something. That'll be like the hot new hype tech coming down the road or something. I don't know. It's gonna be weird.
It's definitely going to be weird. As long as the robots have a
Mhm.
little red light that goes on when they turn evil, we're all good.
Yeah. It's very convenient. It's very useful. That was actually the software uplink is the conceit there.
Right. Um, all right. The idea that humanoid robots wouldn't be in a constant uplink in the first place is kind of one of those weird sci-fi suspension of disbelief things.
Yeah, exactly. They had to make it telegraphed to the audience somehow. So it's a lot of what we're doing, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, it frankly informs a decent amount of our UX decisions, including the robot being humanoid in the first place.
Like maybe too many of our UX decisions are decided by Hollywood, actually, and then we're like, it's not exactly the way it should work.
It'll work good enough.
Yeah.
All right, I think that's our time. Appreciate you coming on, and thank you for those of you who are watching us. And see you next time on the Near AI Office Hours.
Thanks for having me, guys. Take care.